Hey,
All right, Scott, such
I
a
can't believe
pleasure.
this. It's really my pleasure. Yeah, I mean, this is like surreal for me. And as I was just saying a minute ago, I've been following you now for a while once I discovered you. And I mean, I love it because I learn a lot. Every time I listen to your stuff or read the things, I'm constantly learning. And my face just went crazy when I all of a sudden saw in my message that you messaged me because you saw an interview I did. And it
Yeah,
just, so I'm very, very excited about this. So, all right, how have you been?
fantastic. Me too. I'm sharing the excitement completely. And I felt the same way actually when I just saw you start leaving comments on my page some time ago. Such wise sentiments coming from you all the time, just
Hmm.
reflecting on consciousness, these deep themes. And I recognized you right away. And this is the part that you don't yet know.
Oh,
Actually, my dad has been a huge fan of Pink Floyd for most of his life. I've heard
wow.
so much about the band. He's absolutely obsessed with all the original bands, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Pink Floyd, all of the greats. And so I grew up with that deep cultural connection to the music. He's Ukrainian. I've come from a very different, diverse background myself. And I've always just been such a deep feeler. And what a lot of people do start to realize about me lately is that I have this connection to music, which to me is consciousness expressing
Right,
itself through the subtleties of energy and frequency. Music
right.
really is consciousness. And to me, that's been a deep exploration for me. I actually had a conversation with my father. Maybe you can fact check this particular thing that he told me about, which is that Pink Floyd is so iconic that it's actually taught in the curriculum in French schools. Apparently, they
Wow.
weave the nature of Pink Floyd's imprint, the music itself, the diverse lyrics, everything that's energetically imbued in it, especially the ideology behind the music. Do you know if that's true?
Well,
Curious your
it's
take on that.
I've heard, I've heard there's been actually a variety of schools that have taken up what was said. Because I mean, again, if you listen to the music now and you listen to the lyrics, they're very timely. It's like, what were they
Exactly.
thinking back then? So, and we know, I mean, if you look at what's happening globally and stuff now, a lot of this has been going on for the last 50, 75 years, right? This is a
Right.
long walk to get us to where we are right now. So I don't really know much about that, but I have actually heard the same thing that they were doing that. And I would get letters from people saying how they were using it. It's curriculum teachers that would say they would be using it in school and stuff. So yeah, that's very interesting. And one other thing, it's interesting is you mentioned Ukrainian. My mother was the first Russian war bride to come to the United States during World War II, but she was Ukrainian because that back then there was no separation of Russia and Ukraine. It was all one thing. So we
Hmm.
have a little bit of that DNA between us, or however that works, right?
Absolutely. So let me backtrack a little bit so the people that don't know you get a formal
Yeah.
introduction to you. You're an incredibly well-rounded individual. You're now a technologist, you're an entrepreneur, I'd say a conscious entrepreneur involved in NFTs and crypto and going around and speaking at many
Yeah.
different events. But originally you're a musician, a very diverse one. Part of Toto, Supertramp, Pink Floyd, like I mentioned. So many people probably have heard your music, don't necessarily know how rich of a background you have and how many multivariate interests you share in these different fields. So, how did you get into the consciousness space, and how does that relate to your musical background? Do you feel
Right.
like you discovered consciousness through the music, or kind of what's the arrangement of those two things?
No, I think it's a lot like a lot of people discover conscious through suffering, right? That's that crack, the thing that happens. And what I mean, and I listen, I have nothing. I am the most thankful, grateful human being you will ever meet in your life, right? I wouldn't change one thing about my life. I'm so thankful for the word has. I got very lucky, had incredible parents. My mom and my dad. My mom was the most giving human being the world has ever known. My dad was just, you know, the perfect, I mean, like the perfect kind of family in the sense that my dad, I did everything with him. We water skied, we boated, we made surfboards together, we snow skied, we music, and he was a musician too. And I grew up on a television show called the Lawrence Welk Show, which was a big variety show, one of the actual first variety shows back in the early days of television. But going through that, so I mean, I had a very interesting career. I didn't think I was going to be a musician. I started to be an architect, and I was really into the kind of the art world and wanted to build. And then I got in a band with the guys that happened to be from Jeff Porcaro and David Page, who later became Toto, right? And that really got me into the music business. I was the second trumpet player. I was the worst guy in the band at the time, but I decided that, I loved music. I got into that, and I said I dropped all my my drafting stuff, and I took my skills as a draftsman to become a music copyist. Because back in those days, you used to have to, it was a score. The conductor would hand you a score, and you'd have to write out the trumpet parts, the saxophone parts. So I did that because I had a good hand to be in the business. And then later on, that just evolved in more and got into some more bands, and things moved on. And there's a whole other side of it. How I got into the consciousness side of it is it's very fascinating because my life was doing good. I mean, I had a house, cars, I was eating good, life was good, but I just wasn't fulfilled. And
Mhm.
I felt like I got to a point where I was so stale that I could not practice, I could not concentrate, I could not focus on anything, because no matter how much it was that I couldn't realize how kind of good things were around me, I had a different vision of where I would be at that period of time in my life. And it was later on in life, right? This wasn't early. And I tried to practice and I couldn't do anything. And so I actually got a call from a friend of mine. Actually, well, let me go back. I then started a company, had a great success with the company, and then all of a sudden, the company, I got corporate rated. Right, it was one of those things. My business partner, unfortunately, he had to go. Corporate thing. This was a public company, so it's a different story when you're a public company. They brought somebody else in. I saw my baby being taken over because I started the company, and I saw the thing sort of starting us up. So I ended up leaving, and that just made me go into such a funk. Right, I was just like, I couldn't believe it. All this work, these years putting it together. And so I remember I got a call from a friend of mine who was one of my best friends, and his wife and three children they left him, and he was in the funk, and he ended up going to a one of those those types of things where they put 100 people in the room, a workshop, right? And they
Mhm.
basically tear you down, and then they kind of rebuild you back up again, right? And it was called Insight, and it was out of Santa Monica. And I remember it was my birthday coming up, and I said, you know what, for my birthday, I'm going to go do this, just because I needed something, because again, I was suffering. I couldn't sleep. I was going crazy. So my home, the thing I loved the most, tore down. And
Mhm.
so I went to this workshop thing, and it was like 3-day, 4-day intensive, and it changed my life. And what it did is it made me start to focus inward, right? And I got so into it, I started getting into reading, spiritual books. Fell
Mhm.
into Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. That book spoke to me. It was one of the things, because as we know, all the teachings are really the same, right? They all point to the same space, the same thing. I don't
Yeah.
care what it is, because I've been through the Quran, I've been through the Bible, I've read the Tao Te Ching is one of my favorite books. I still read that constantly, a page a day. I got certain things just to kind of get into the game. But that Eckhart book hit me. I ended up reading that book probably 60 times in a row. I just read it, and then I listened to it in my car, him reading that book for 2 years. I just made this my car the shrine. I used to pray for traffic. I would say, "Oh, please give me traffic," so I'd be stuck in my shrine so I could listen to Eckhart talking to me, right? So, and I kept reading it because I realized every time I read the book, it was different. Each time the words changed every time, and it get deeper and got deeper and got deeper. Then
Mhm.
it goes back to that, we were in your post the other day, we were talking about spiritual ego, right? That was kind of the
Yeah.
interesting point. So I got to tell you, after 2 years of reading this book and things, man, I was feeling pretty spiritually together, right? I thought, I got this down. I'm a spiritual warrior now. Life's good. I was feeling good. Things were going good and all that. April 9th, 10:12, 11 at 10:12 in the morning, 2011, I wake up. I remember it so distinctly. And I rubbed my eyes and I looked, and I saw myself in the mirror, and I went, huh, I blinked and 40 something years went by. Time is an illusion. At that moment, because I'd read it in the books, they always talk about time, the illusion of time. And yeah, I understand that, right? Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, at that moment, it's not about understanding, because I always tell people, if you understand it, you've missed it. Because you cannot understand it, you can only know it, right? There's a different thing. At that moment, I realized time was an illusion, because I blinked and all this went by, and I'm sitting here, and how did that even happen? But then the profound thing happened is I realized at that moment that the voice that's inside of me hasn't changed. It was the same as when I was 3, 4 years, 5 years old. until now. It didn't change. The voice didn't change. The thing, nothing aged. It was always that same thing. And at that moment, I
Mm-hmm.
realized you don't die, right? I just realized that you don't, that was it. You don't die because that's really who I am. I'm not the meat suit, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
had that profound statement, right? Profound moment. And so next thing I did is I went and read the book again and I missed it. It was 180 degrees different than I had thought from that moment on. The words, all the words change. And that's when I realized that spiritual ego, your ego can make you feel like, oh, I've got this down. But I had completely missed the meaning of the entire book. But from that moment on, it shifted. So it was really, really the suffering that I went through, losing something that was so dear to me, and then going through this process. But it was I got into it very deeply, like and then Dr. David Hawkins, which you probably know,
Mm-hmm.
who's one of my all-time favorites. I really love his books because these books, when you read them, they have different certain words will speak to different people. Certain books will work for different people to help them kind of get in, figure it out.
Right.
And during that time, I was constantly working, meditating, right? The whole thing of meditating. And once I realized the whole concept of meditating is really going to the state of no mind, right? There's no thought. And
Mm-hmm.
it's complex, right? I'd sit there and stare at plants for like hours, right? Just meditating, trying to get in the way. And then I'll never forget the first day that thought dropped. It was like, and I felt this kind of rush. It was like, what was, and then you go, what is that? Now you're thinking again, you're back in thought again.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have that first taste, that's the game. It's like an apple. I mean, I know Eckhart used to talk, or something I can't, when anyone read, I could tell you what an apple tastes like, but it's juicy, it's sweet, it's a little sour, but until you
Mm-hmm.
taste it, you will never know. Same type of thing. So those were, that was kind of my journey, those years of really getting into the books and reading. And now it's just, I'm in a constant state of meditating, right? I meditate with my
Mm-hmm.
eyes open. I'm constantly meditating because I realize that the only thing that's real, and I try to tell everybody this, the only thing that's real is you be talking. That's it,
Right.
right? Everything else is a complete illusion. 5 minutes ago, can't touch it. 5 minutes from now, you can't touch. So as you start to take a look and you start to see that the only step that matters is the one that you're taking right now, your perspective changes. And I try to explain to people the past to me is like, that guy running on the bridge in a cartoon, like
Mm-hmm.
and the bridge keeps breaking behind him, but he keeps getting 1 foot on and it's crashing behind him. That's how I feel the past is, because it's almost like I'm constantly in the state of awareness. And what I mean by that, the puzzle is, how do I know I'm aware that I'm aware? Right. That's the puzzle
Right.
that everybody has to solve, right? Because until you figure that out, you're still dancing, you're still searching, you're still seeking. And what the
Right.
crazy part about this is it's so stupid simple, but we miss it, right? We miss the whole thing. So that's been my journey. And now it's like, even like this big angel I have back here. See, that's called the angel of now. And
Uh-huh.
that was 15 years ago. And it was painted, and it was all about presence. And that's to me, all that matters is this moment here, because that's the only thing that's real. It's the only thing I can actually affect. I can actually change.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get out of that and you realize that time, another one of your posts, we were talking about time. I was
Mm-hmm.
going to comment, but I was on a plane and I couldn't at the time. Time is our problem.
Yeah.
All the suffering comes in time, because we're mental suffering. Obviously, unless there's a freaking a lion chasing you or something, or you're getting beat
Mm-hmm.
up in the actual moment, that's a different thing. But all that mental suffering is because of time, because we identify with the past, we identify with the future, our body, we identify with the thoughts in our head. And so that whole journey of basically getting to the point where you try to flip from being the thinker to the watcher, right? It's that whole puzzle of, how do I become the watcher of my thoughts as opposed to be living my thoughts, which are a total,
Mm-hmm.
it's total illusion. So this is, like I
Right.
said, the only thing that I really care about, period, because I know I blinked, I'll be 50, and then I'll blink, I'll be on my deathbed. right? It's going to be one of those things. Boom. Oh, what happened? How did that happen out of nowhere? So that's been sort of my kind of my journey. And it's like I said, this is my favorite subject, the only subject that really matters. We have one job, and Eckhart used to say it's to help consciousness unfold. And so that's why I was
Hmm.
so happy to meet you, because I know you're a consciousness person.
Absolutely. And that's something that definitely unifies us. I know your favorite word or term is consciousness, and guess what? It's mine also. I love the everything consciousness. It's what I promote. And what you
Yeah.
just summed up so beautifully is the philosophy of oneness, of unity consciousness. And it's
Yeah.
really, it's an action, it's an embodiment, it's an experience of bringing this consciousness into every aspect of your life and of your human journey. And you
Yeah.
summed it up so well in these different concepts, like fractal abstractions of what consciousness is, from mindfulness to presence, non duality. You broke down these themes so perfectly because there's so many subtleties. But the question is really, how do we integrate it? Because it's one thing to have the awareness, to have the realization, or the breakthrough, which so many people experience in different ways. Could
Right.
be a near death experience, could be a psychedelic journey, could just
Yep.
be a wake up call that reality gives you. But
Right.
how do we actually live consciously, Scott? How do you do it? How do you take that knowing and you translate it to every part of your life?
Well, it all gets down to the key is getting to the point where you surrender to what is, right? So I made it a game. I have this thing I called enlightenment, the ultimate game. I don't need anybody else to be in the game. It's just me, myself, and the universe. And how you do it is, I had a couple things. I got a couple tricks, what I'll call tricks, or things that worked for me, right? That I'll share, because so maybe it'll work for somebody else, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
I had read in a book this one time that it said I was in bed one night, and it says, every time as often as you can during the day, as often as you can, stop yourself where you are, put all your attention, every cell of your body where you are, and put your surroundings. So like right now, I'm sitting in my living room, my attention's here, and then ask this question: what are you feeling right now? Are you feeling any anxiety, tension, or fear? Well, I'm sitting here with a cup of coffee talking to you right now. If I'm feeling any anxiety, tension, or fear, unless that lion's chasing me, it's because I'm identified with a thought, right? And every time you do this, you wake up a little bit, because you start to wake up. So I said, oh, next day I'm going to get out. I'm going to do this all day. This is going to be my exercise. The next thing I know, I'm laying in bed the next night, and I couldn't even ask that question once, because I was so lost in thought. Emails, phones, things, stuff you got to do. You get caught up in the movie in your head, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
present enough to even ask that question. So I said, okay, next day I'm going to do it. Next day I did it maybe 2 or 3 times, right? And then I said, that's it. So I ended up putting stickers in my house. I put them up in my coffee. When I go get my coffee in the morning, it says, wake up. Put them on my computer, put them everywhere. And every time I kept asking that question, you wake up a little bit till you come to the day you go, who's asking that? I mean, who's watching? Because you see yourself, you're asking, like, well, what am I thinking? You become aware of where you are, what's going on. You realize, oh, I'm all tense and stuff. And I'm going, why? I'm having a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Reality is there's nobody hurting me at this moment. There's nothing going on, right? And each time you do that, you wake up a little bit to the point where you start to flip to where you
Mm-hmm.
now start to watch your thoughts. And I used to watch myself going into meetings, because I'd be a business guy going, I'm hustling, trying to close the deal, right? Trying
Mm-hmm.
to close the deal. That's the thing. And I'd work really hard. And, okay, I'm manipulating the conversation to get the deal. And I'd look at myself, what am I? You're an idiot. Why are you doing this? Why? Right? So I realized that once I flip that, I start to watch, and to be that point. Now, you say, how do I apply it? I've now gotten to the point where I go into any meetings, I have no expectations. I don't like, if it's going to work, it's going to work. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work. That's fine. I don't really care anymore, because all I'm care about is what am I feeling right now, and what is the experience that I'm having in reality, right? The
Mm-hmm.
more that you can take that point of view, it's interesting. Everything starts to just happen. It's almost like you're in a tractor field to stuff, even crazy stuff like, I try to explain to people. People say, well, where are you on the spiritual cycle? And I said, here's how you measure it. First of all, when you become aware, it's more you feel it. for me at least, it's a feeling. It's less about understanding, because if you understand it, you missed it. Can't understand
Hmm.
it, it's annoying. And I remembered, it's like people go like this, oh, I'm up, life's good, I'm excited, and all of a sudden, oh, something goes wrong. I crash. Ooh, now I'm down and
Hmm.
down. And now how long do I stay down? Is it a day, an hour, a week, a month? Oh, then something good happens and then I'm up again. So this roller coaster ride tells you how much you surrender. Because when you surrender to what is, because whatever's happened, you cannot change it, you cannot move it, you cannot do anything. To identify with something that happened, which is identifying what might have happened in the past or something that may happen in the future, you end up you get locked into this horrible kind of feeling. So I ended up, it's like this. So as you start to monitor yourself, it's like up and, oh yeah, you go down, but then, oh, I got myself back up. And as you go up, you go down, then all of a sudden the thing starts to go like this. And then all of a sudden, ooh, you kind of flat line, because
Hmm.
then you start to get to the point where you're going, it's fine. I'll take whatever gets thrown at me, right? Because that's okay. I'm going to have to deal with it. I may not like it. I'm not saying it's great, but I'm not going to suffer from it for days, because you accept what is. And I try to explain also to people, accepting what is and forgiveness are identical. And what I mean by that, you cannot forgive unless you surrender. You cannot surrender unless you forgive, right? So it's that piece. So I knew it was about, I forget, it was like, I'll never forget my story of where it really kind of helped me understand where I was at. Is I just got finished playing a gig in Redondo Beach, and I got in the car and I started driving. I drove for about 15, 20 minutes. I reached over to get my phone, and my phone wasn't there. I lost my phone. But you know what happens when people lose your phone?
Uh-huh.
Where's my phone? Oh no, where's it going to go? What's going to happen? Right? We go through this whole
Right.
crazy thing. So I turned around, went back to the club, knocked on the door. Nobody was in. All of a sudden the door comes open. And, oh man, look, we looked all over the club. It's gone. Right? I can't find the phone. So I said, okay, I'm going to go. So start going. I start walking out. All of a sudden the guy goes, Mister, is this it? Found the phone, and he gave it to me. I got in the car, and at that moment I realized, I said, oh, it didn't take me over. I just basically went with it. It was like the strangest thing. I sat there and I cried. I sat in that car, I'm telling you, at 2:30 in the morning in that parking lot, and I cried like a baby, because I realized that I didn't let me take it over. And now it's like when those challenges happen, that's the beautiful part. And what's weird about it is, oh, somebody's trying to call me. Oops, sorry. Oh, stop. Send a voicemail. I should have had that there. Sorry. Am I there?
All
Okay,
good.
back.
Yep.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
That even when things are happening, if you just let them go and surrender, it seems like they heal themselves. It fixes
Right.
itself. It's really strange, because I end up finding, I can't tell you how many times I've left my phone in the airport in some place or whatever, and then I just go, okay, go back, and I go search around, and I end up getting it back. It's the same
Hmm.
thing with business. It's the same thing with everything. So the concept of just kind of surrendering and going in with the right intent, right, and
Hmm.
not letting it take you over, it becomes the puzzle, right? It becomes a challenge that I kind of look forward to. I even look forward when things go wrong now, because it's like I want to see how I'm going to do with this one, right? So
Right.
it's really, it's the practical thing is devotion to it, right? It has to be something you
Hmm.
really care about. A lot of people say, "Oh, I'm ready for this," and then you start feeling so good, and then they forget about it, right? If we go on this roller coaster, and that's okay. It just depends on where you are on that journey. But applying it is really just really adhering to the fact of total surrender to what is, right?
Uh-huh.
Just whatever it is. And I try to explain, for me, it's like my mom, when she passed away, I got to hold her on her last breath. And it was the most strangest thing. It was one of the most incredible, beautiful gifts that I'd ever gotten. I always tell anybody, if you ever get a chance to sit with a dying person, there's nothing more powerful that's going to help you and help you everything. And so I'm so thankful for that moment, where some people are all freaked out. Oh, I can't take it and everything.
Hmm.
And it's just, that's not what it is, right? So yeah, so I think it's just surrender. That's the game. But how do I know? How do I surrender? Is the puzzle, right? And
Hmm.
and a couple things. One other thing is meditation, real quick, just to jump into
Hmm.
this, because I
Sure.
think about it, is what I do on a meditative state is I realize I used to sit there and I get up in the morning and I Wim Hof breathe, and then I go through my meditations. And I would sit there and I would stare at plants. I love nature to look at because nature, there's something energy there, and you kind of get yourself in that state, calm mind going down and down. And then I had this realization that if I put my attention on the stillness and the space that's around this, so if I'm staring at the plant, my attention isn't on the plant. I'm looking right at it. My attention is on the stillness and the silence that surrounds everything. And I could be out in the trees, the wind, the rain, but when you put your attention on the stillness and the silence that surrounds everything, it automatically kind of brings you into that space. So from a meditative point for me, stillness and silence and whatever I'm looking at. That's why when I walk around, I'm constantly in what I'll call wide mode. It's like a state of just being aware of everything around. And that trick to me helped me a lot by putting my attention there. And you can always tell how you're doing when you're meditating by how you feel. That's your little gauge.
Mm-hmm.
When you feel that little stillness and peacefulness that comes on, and when it completely drops, you feel this just sense of peace. It's crazy. And then you become addicted.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you want, right? Oh, I
Right.
want that all the time, right? So yeah.
Beautiful. I think you just unpacked how to live consciously, how to basically enjoy the feeling of being conscious awareness and just staying in that state. And I have so many reflections on what you just said because there's just so much there, so many gems of wisdom. First of all, you're basically summing up you've always been a feeler. You're a very soulful person. And I want to bring that back to even the start of your career.
Oh
Something
yeah.
about the music that you've produced, that you've been a part of. There's something about that that even makes iconic music. I think it's that soulfulness. It's the emotive nature there. That's a
Okay.
huge key ingredient. And I personally, like I love Depeche Mode. They're my favorite band, similar to
Mhm.
Pink Floyd in terms of the depth of those lyrics and the
Mhm.
emotions and just the profoundness of that music. But there's something about that that I think just relays what consciousness is. When you listen to it, there's a world of emotion communicated. You could feel the intentions of the songwriter, of the composer, right? Everybody that went into that music. They share their world, they share their emotional backstory. The instruments, the frequency, the emotions conveyed, everything about it, and the lyrics, of course, they paint this whole picture that puts somebody in that same state of consciousness when they're listening to it. It's almost like looking at artwork. We could study art and see there's fractals in the art, which actually relays the neurophysiological composition of the artist in that moment. Their state of consciousness is relayed in the artwork. And I think the same thing happens in music. Just by listening to it, you can entrain your own brainwaves to register that, and you become a part of that person's inner world experience, which is beautiful, but it's something very personal. And I think a lot of young people today, especially, are missing out on that because they're not in touch with the emotional backstory. They're not actually tuned into those lyrics. They're not feeling the depth of what music is because modern music, in large part, not all of it, of course, but it's missing that kind of deep soulful component, which I think, your group definitely conveyed, and a lot of groups from before this current era have been really actively partaking in. So what is that? Speak a little bit to the conscious experience
Yeah.
and also the suffering that comes along with that, because so many of these band members, they were suffering, they were drug addicts, they were, finding ways to escape reality, because through that emotional backstory also comes great suffering because of how soulful people like you are. So how does all that entangle?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question because everything when I play, I always say I play so I can get closer to God or the source or what anybody wants to call it. And I try to explain to people the word God is the biggest obstacle to God because it creates duality, right? It creates that dualistic thing. But it was interesting you said that. I used to every night when I was playing clubs years and years ago, I used to tape myself every night, right from the gig, so that when I drive home at night, I'd throw the cassette into my thing and I'd listen to myself to critique. Am I rushing, dragging? Am I out of tune? What I play? And did that. I did that for like 7, 8 years. I mean, just constantly because I was constantly trying to learn, right? And I'll never forget that during that time, about 4 or 5 times of all of those moments, I listened to myself play and I said, oh, how did I do that? Where did that come from? I couldn't figure it out, right? I played stuff that I never played before, and it was incredible, right? And I never understood it through the years. And then when I started getting into the meditative state, and I realized now what had happened, I stopped thinking. Thought dropped. So I had actually gone into that meditative state, right? That, all of that really comes down to that pointed state of thought, right? It's pointed state. And
Hmm.
when we were making records in the studio, we would, we'd all get in that room and we didn't have all the same kind of tools. You had to commit. We had 24 tracks and you'd have drums, bass, guitars, and they'd eat up a lot of the tracks. And we didn't have all this, tools where you can pitch change and fix and flip and, change everything about them. We had to figure out how to make it. And we used to get in the room. And I'll never forget, there was a guy that was the producer for all the Al Green records. And he put it really clearly. What happens is when you're in that room and you bring all the mental, everybody's attention at the same place. He did this thing. He used to do a trick. He would go, this is great for all you music people out there. If you're making records, it's a gym, right? He would go, we'd rehearse the track because you got the guitar player, everybody's there, you got the headphones on, they're getting ready to cut the track. We're in the studio. And then he'd say, okay, everybody, we're going to conjure up the Holy Ghost. And he'd go clap the tempo of the song, right? He just get this groove going and he'd make everybody clap. But until he had one clap, till it sounded like one clap, because what he was knowing is the guy couldn't be thinking about his girlfriend if he's over there, because to get this thing to really groove, he would basically focus everybody to get everybody to that pointed sense of attention, right?
Hmm.
And then once it was there, he would count 1, 2, 3, and then everybody would start. And if you listen to those records, when they start, they're like on fire. The groove is just undeniable, right? It takes your breath away. And those things rock so hard because he was focusing everybody's attention on the same thing. The great music, because when we had to make records, like I said, you had to commit. I'd have to okay, I'm gonna put a solo on the record. You go in there, you got 2 tracks. Okay, that's it. I get 2 shots at this thing, and I'm going to go for it. And you try to get yourself in that space, and then you go play it and you put it down. And what I'd find is that even some of my best solos, things that I've ever done, they were not. It ended up being kind of the first take. It wasn't the ones that were really good. It was the ones that had little mistakes in them, and little things, because it was like it was coming through you. You're not attached. You're not thinking about it. You're just putting it out there. So every time now when I play, and again, I feel very fortunate that I'm at a place now where I can flip thought on, thought off. When it's so crazy, it's so stupid simple, but it's hard. That's what's so crazy about it. It's like this thing you search for, and once you finally taste it, you go, "That's it? Okay, it's great." So I use that now whenever I play because it allows me to get to that point. But yeah, when we made records back in the day, it was really the people in the room. We didn't have cell phones. It was the attention and everybody working together. And that's why those records will stand the test of time. There's so many records that are being made now, so much music, but you're not going to remember it. It'll always go back to the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and handfuls of bands that at those days you could feel and hear people think. So that's when I hear great solos. You can feel where it's at. And I think for me, the thing that really helped me to get to kind of focus that was when I was learning. I started working with a guy that I had met on a recording session by the name of Jerry Jumanville, who became my mentor. Incredible saxophone player out of New Orleans, Dr. John. He's on those Rod Stewart records, just an incredible saxophone. But this guy loved the saxophone more than any human being on the entire planet. He never stopped playing. So after we did this session, when I was a trumpet player at the time, I went back to his house. We hanging out, and he got his saxophone, and he played me every Fathead, Newman, Lockjaw, Davis, Ben Webster, Quebec solo. Just like he knew him, every solo, and I was mesmerized. So I went out and I said, I'm going to become a saxophone player. So I went out and bought a saxophone, and I came back to his house, and for the next 6 months, every day I'd go there and we practiced. And what he did was we would take one phrase of a great saxophone player like Hank Crawford, let's say, Easy Living, blah, da, 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 whatever it was. And we would play it over and over again until it sounded like one saxophone. And what that did is it would focus your attention to where, because you can't be, when you're starting, you start hearing differently by taking something very precise like that and trying to mimic it so exact that you almost take the soul of that person over. From
Hmm.
that, my model has always been, instead of going wide, I think you learn more by taking something that's one thing and just going really deep into it. And I mean really
Hmm.
deep. It's like a drum machine or a metronome. I ate, drink, sleep metronomes. Man, I was all about the time. And when I realized how complex it was just to do the metronome, right? Because you could get to the point, like if you took a cowbell and you would sink it into the groove, you can feel the stick sink in when that thing is just hitting in, and you start hearing differently. So taking a very pointed study of something that's classic. I always tell musicians, take a 4 bars of a Charlie Parker solo or 4 bars of something, and go spend a month on that until
Hmm.
you become that. And what happens is there's almost a transfer of energy and a way of thinking, and it tunes the way you hear and you think. And it's, oh gosh, somebody's trying to call me again. I should have turned my phone off. Ah, sorry, folks.
You're good. Keep going.
uh, so yeah, that focus really starts to tune a different way of listening and thinking. And it's funny because when Toto, this is an example of that.
Hmm.
I started in the kid band with these guys when we were kids, right? And then Jeff Porcaro, and then they all took off. They became big stars fast. They were doing all the television shows and doing Steely Dad records and all this stuff. And so I practice and I'm 24/7. I want to get to the point that I'm going to get good enough. And finally, I got a call to go play with them after I did my Supertramp stint. They called me up to come play with me in the band. I was so scared because this was like this. Jeff Porcaro was my mentor, and he was the one that made me get up and practice every day. He was always in the back of my mind. I wanted to get to a point where I could be accepted into that clique, right? So I got the call, and now I got the music out, and I'm practicing the music like I've done 2 weeks. 12 hours a day. I want to walk into that rehearsal and I want to knock it out of the park. I want them to go, oh, Paige, this is it. I got all my stuff set up. I'm at the rehearsal. I couldn't sleep the night before. I'm all panicked and everything. I go into that rehearsal, and the first thing Jeff Porcaro did was hand me a cowbell. Made me play cowbell on the first song so he could see
Wow.
how my time was, because his time, he's one of the greatest drummers all time. He passed way too early, but he's on thousands of records, and he's considered the guy because his groove was so insane. I mean, just to talk about. And so I always tell people say, well, what was the best thing about playing with Toto? I said, I played cowbell with Jeff Porcaro on 4 songs, because his riser was here, he was down here, and I was up on a riser right next to him, and we would look in each other's eyes, and he would just, and I'd sink that drum, and I could feel that drum sink in when he was hitting the drum at the same time, to where we locked in so tightly. I tried to tell you this was better than sex. It's because you're just like in this zone and that space that you're in. So yeah, it's all about I believe it's about really appointing your attention,
Hmm.
right? And
Right.
I've heard, there's different ways. You can either take something and, we've heard people, they get there by putting their attention on a point or by going completely wide, right? It's like there's a
Hmm.
two ways of kind of getting to that point where it's at. So for me, yeah, it's music listen, we're frequency at the bottom line. We're note, right? At the quantum level. We're just
Right.
a vibration. And music is the thing. And what's so fascinating, I feel right now, just talking about music, is how everything's feeling very demonic. All
Hmm.
of this, machine music and everything that's going on. And I remember where this really hit me hard about 3 years, 4 years, or just, I can't remember, it was before COVID, right after, I think it was right after COVID. NFTLA, because I'm heavy in this whole NFT, Web3, that's my kind of world I live in. I produced 2 nights at a place called Wisdom in LA. It's a big 360-degree immersive domes in downtown Los Angeles. And the first night we did basically an exploration of Pink Floyd, and I used my band Thank X. And man, the spirit of that, it was the most unbelievable. And it was packed. We had like almost 1,000 people at this place, in this place. All the, the sponsors, the vendors, everything was there. And that night felt unbelievable. The next night we had Steve Aoki, and I'm not going to say anything bad about Steve Aoki because he's great for what it is. The different in the vibe, nothing changed other than the music. And I'll never forget the first night there was such a feeling of spirit and kind of joy. The next night, boom, 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 these really crazy tones. You could see everybody kind of walking around like zombies or something in it. And the energy level was so dark. It had a very dark, very crazy thing. And that's why right now, I believe we're in frequency and spiritual war that's going on out there right now. And music is a big part of it. I went to, I was invited to a very big artist. I don't want to say who the artist is because I don't want to put anything. And I was invited to Sony for the unveiling of the new record and getting ready to go on the tour. And I went there and you could see, wow, this is crazy. I'm looking at these shirts. They've got kind of crazy blood and gore and stuff on it. I'm like, oh, this is kind of strange. I never thought this artist would have stuff like this. The next thing I see, all the lights were, the whole light show was fluorescent lighting, just bright white fluorescent lighting with red. And the guy comes hanging down with, through those things when they hang you, that whole crazy sexual thing that goes on, and comes down here and somebody's got back and blood and gore. But the crazy part is just before it started, about 2-3 minutes before, they put a frequency on that was like, you could see it was so pleasing, but it was so dark. It played on those dark sexual energies. You could see how that the frequency, and I just noticed you could see everybody, kind of getting taken over by it. And this is before the show even started. They just ran this tone with these bright lights in this thing, and it was just like, it was so dark. I mean, I had to leave. I just like, this is,
Wow.
I gotta go. I ended up saying, no thanks, I'm out of here. This is the thing we're fighting right now. You're seeing it everywhere, right? You're seeing it, especially with AI coming on now. We have a very interesting process because I equate AI to the mind, because the mind knows no right from wrong. It doesn't know truth from false. It's thing, and it's easy to prove. If the mind was capable of knowing right from wrong or truth from falsehood, there'd be no war. It's just simple, right? There'd be no war, and so the mind it's that other thing. And when you think of AI knows no right or wrong. It just is. It reminds me of the mind. So we're at a point now where the machine and consciousness are having. Now, there is a case to be made that consciousness is changing form, right? It's energy, because at the end of the day, it's just energy, right? So is it changing? Is the form changing now? Will humans even be? I kind of believe, as crazy as it is, I think humans are completely designing themselves out right now. Now, at the end of the day, this thing's going to keep on spinning. Consciousness is going to keep unfolding. It's all okay. It's going to be what it is. I just don't like to see the suffering that will probably come from a lot of this that I think we're about to see, which I think is, it's people have no idea what's coming. Being a technologist, I live this stuff. So I'm very aware of what the machines are doing. I'm actually involved in I have an NFT project with some partners that are, we just sold out our third collection. It's crazy. It's on fire. But the storyline is, the whole thing is done with AI. Every piece of it is AI. But the whole storyline is how to get out of the matrix to become a free thinker. Is you have to join the matrix and use the tools to get out of the matrix. So our whole thing is all about waking people up, but we're using those tools to make people see what's happening. So yeah, this is a very, very interesting time. I had seen just talking about this, I listened to a podcast with the guy that I listened to, and he had on a Satanist priest as a guy, 35, 40 years in the church. And he left because he said he couldn't take it anymore. I'm like, wow, you put 30, 40 years into this religion, and now he's even freaking out, right? And he left. And so the guy said, well, what did they say when you left? He said, they laughed. And he says, well, you were going to go tell everybody. He says, they didn't care. He said, why? He says, first of all, they said, no one's going to believe you. Number two. And he says, we already own Hollywood. We're in your banks. We're in your schools. We're in your government. We're everywhere. What you miss is, what is Satanism? Satanism, it's not about kids sacrificing animals in a back room. That has nothing to do with it. It's basically an ideology that it's all about me. If it feels good, do it. Morals are secondary.
Right.
And right now we're seeing morals being hijacked, right? They're using
Mm-hmm.
morals to make people do goofy things where they've taken over stuff, right? So I watched that, and then it was interesting. About 3 months later, I saw a podcast with a woman by the name of Laura Logan. And Laura Logan she was a big war correspondent. She was at CBS, CNN, amazing, really, really incredible. And she said she was able to have a meeting with the people that sit above the Western central banks, the monetary system, like the real money, the money that's been passed down for generations and generations. I mean, the real power sources, which I think more people are waking up that these things happen because those people had the money. They didn't just lose it. It just moved down through the generations. And she said she met with those people, and she said she couldn't say who it was, what it is. She said they only care about one thing. She said they don't care about the people. They don't care about the money. They care about one thing: destroying God. When I heard that phrase, I said, thing. And now you look at everything: destroying Christmas. You could go to the weed store, but you can't go to church, right? During COVID. I mean, all these crazy things that are going on, right? So I think we're in a place right now where we're really, from a spiritual point of view, this is a spiritual war that we have going on between good and evil, right? And but then again, this is the yin and yang of what this is all about, right? So I in some ways, I don't know how. I mean, again, it's what is, because everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
That's just the way it works. If it happened, it happened. It's supposed to have happened. Otherwise, right? So it's very interesting. It's so that's why I care about what you're doing, because I think we got to care about the children, the kids, and kind of waking people up into where we're at right now. And I'm hopeful.
Time.
It is time, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on that. First of all, I just want to say that it sounds like you're reading my mind. I think we're so entangled. There's an interesting situation happening here where I'm thinking certain things, and it's as if you're just reading those thoughts and speaking to them. The spiritual war aspect, even the music, the situation you mentioned with like the bass sounding music, very uncanny that you mentioned that, because I experienced something very similar. Once I showed up at this event, which was supposed to be a sound healing event, sound bowls and such were utilized with a group of people. I'd never done an experience like this before. And at some point, the shaman, sort of a neo-shaman, I could say, that was guiding this sacred sound journey, he blasted this kind of a bass sound through these big Bose speakers. And the whole room started to pulsate with this very low frequency noise. It sounded machine-like. The best way I could capture it is it sounded like this kind of a drone or some kind of an alien machinery sort of a noise. I think that sounds a lot like what you experience. It's a weird noise. It sounds artificial, kind of like an AI sort of a frequency overall. And so I heard that, and I'm a projector by human design type. So the way that I read energy is always it's like my toroidal field just takes in impulses from other people. I'm constantly scanning frequencies. And I felt these little like explosions in the room where the primal nature of people started to come out. Exactly what you said. There was a demonic essence that was revealed. People's suppressed emotions started coming up to the surface. Anger. People started to kind of roar. Like those very low density experiences were coming up to be integrated. But he was trying to just summon that demonic essence because he could tell that that's what these people are needing to deal with.
Right.
And so it was not a high frequency destination. And really right now what I'm seeing is a lot of spirituality is either dealing with escapism or helping people sort of integrate temporarily the lower frequency emotions and experiences, because we're not taught how to hold space for emotions. We're not taught how to be conscious, how to just surrender, how to go through life in this divine way that you speak of. And so the only way to deal with those outbursts of anger and all those demonic energies is by, first of all, entangling with more sources of the same lower frequency energy. And that's why people get so sucked into, porn and greedy pursuits and have these very lower dimensional relationships and entanglements. And everything's at that level of just the primitive need to sustain the ego, that
Yeah.
sense of I. It's separateness. And it's why the music these days just speaks to that kind of separation. The lyrics, they're just reflecting a society that's, hungry for love and connection, but that's lacking it so severely. And
Well,
that's what the AI situation is unfolding. We see this dichotomy, but I think the really important question is, what do we do about it? Because
yeah,
AI is as much a reflection of our consciousness and a mirror of our awareness as much as it can be part of the existential crisis, the
yeah,
overtaking of consciousness and creativity. And it's really up to us to decide how can we use this in a conscious way to augment our awareness, our intelligence, our empathy, to put AI maybe in its separate position as a facilitator of the conscious experience, as a tool, as something that can help us, that can support, let's say, sound healing or new kinds of exploration of the self, and use it for cool things like you're using it for business, for crypto, all these technologies that support human sovereignty and
yeah.
expand human potential, as opposed to possibly just removing human identities, and people are getting sucked into it, which is one area I want to touch on with you before we get into the other aspects of conscious living, conscious
Yeah.
relationships, because I
Yeah.
think that's the undertone here, which is really the state of the identity, which is right
Yeah.
now in question. How
Yeah.
is AI changing relationships, do you
Oof,
feel? Because a lot of young people would be happy to, have a conscious girlfriend or boyfriend, conscious, an AI sort of relationship as opposed to a conscious partnership because of this kind of narcissism, social alienation
yeah.
nowadays because of porn and sex being
Yeah.
something that's so convenient to receive in a superficial way. It seems like AI is going to provide the easiest
Oh,
solution
big.
for people that
Yeah.
have that lack of self awareness,
Well,
even.
and it's free thinking, right? We have to be able to free think. Unfortunately, whoever controls the algorithms controls the people, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's where we're at because we've seen now how everybody's divided and all that. And it's not just happening. It's by design. There's no question. Whoever
Yep.
they can feed certain stuff. If you see it enough, we see how humans can get caught up in it. Because I see the smartest people I know, some of the smartest, they can't free think anymore. They can't step
Mm-hmm.
out of the matrix, right? They're locked into the matrix. They can't get away. And again, even like when you were talking about the spiritual thing, I think the new age movement has been taken over too.
Absolutely.
It's all being taken over. And a perfect example, and I'll just throw it, is sorry, all you Burning Man people out there, because what I'm going to say is it's like, I've been twice. I went the first time, and the first time by the fourth day, I said, this is the decline of the Western civilization. They're putting up men and they're burning them and all this stuff. But yet it was all from a kind of a spiritual, new age, do good
Right.
point of view, but they could not see the dark tones that are being crept into this. You've got like the Buddhist temple, and then you've got the orgy dome next to it, or
Mm-hmm.
it's like these crazy things, this freedom. It's all about being free, about doing everything, but it's morals are being pushed down to a secondary market. This is you know I almost don't know the answer to this one because it is because of the human condition, right? The humans not being able to step above and be able to free think once they've been trained. And again, when you think about kids waking up with the AI, and they go the AI, and they're going to school every day with my app, right? And the AI says this is a car. This is the car. What the kid's going to think? This is a car. It's not a dollar, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so we have that, and so it's not if AI was used by consciousness, it could be unbelievable to just take people to the next level. If it was all done in the sense that was controlling, the part that's a drag is we have the human condition in there. Those people that have a darker side or are tied into that energy, and they want to use it for that, right? And we're going to see that
Mm-hmm.
more and more this next year, especially going into this election cycle. It's about to
Yeah.
get just completely
Crazy.
crazy. Yeah, and that's why for me, again, I look at, I'm a total decentralized maxi. I believe in decentralization like crazy, right? That's my whole thing. And that's why I've got into the crypto space because in Web3, because that's all about decentralization. Now, don't get me wrong, there are centralized kind of Web3 apps and things that are in that space. But again, when I look at what happens like with NFTs, once people really truly understand what those are, it's freedom for the people. This is the movement. It's a freedom movement to allow us to basically take back the power of the currency and back the power of the relationship, and doing trading and trading back one to one, consumer to consumer. Right? There's nobody in between. Yet the forces, they don't want that. They want this control thing, and you can even see it. They're proposing now. We're talking about, oh, humans aren't smart enough. We need an AI president, right? That's what we need, is an AI president, except for the guy that's controlling the algorithms in the back room. Now, if it was Eckhart Tolle or Dr. David Hawkins doing the algorithms, I'd be going, yeah, let's go. This is like, we're going to take this we're taking consciousness to the next level where we could go. Now, maybe there will that be. Maybe what'll happen is the conscious people will create AI that keeps AI in check. Could it? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting, and it especially gets interesting as we go into quantum, because now quantum computing changes the game. Because remember, it was binary, most things on and off, yes, no. Now we got yes, no, and maybe. Ooh, now we got these machines at a point where they're actually thinking, right? So this is a very, very interesting time. I think the planet is waking up, though. I think people are now like stepping out and saying, well, what's happening to me right now? I'm looking around. My paycheck doesn't go as far anymore. Rents are through the roof. All these crazy things with, viruses and stuff being made in labs and people telling us stuff. I think people are starting to step out, because the pain, remember, it goes down to that suffering. It's amazing, the power of suffering. Suffering can wake you up. And that's why I always say, that could be the greatest thing that could happen. So maybe we have to go through this suffering right now to help us get to that point. But relationships, I mean, no question. I mean, that's, when you start seeing what happens in the VR world with sex and stuff, you can imagine people just sitting in their room with the glasses on and never leaving, right? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
all pleasure. It's all pleasure. It's very interesting, but I just don't know. I'm so torn between this. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that there's going to be the white knight will step up. Again, at the end of the day, the Fibonacci sequence is going to win, right? We know that nature will happen. It
Yeah.
will push it out somewhere, somehow, whether humans are here or not. This thing is going to keep rocking, because, again, it's just one thing. I'm a non-dualist totally. I'm just a meat
Mm-hmm.
suit walking around. This thing's walking through, making me do whatever's going on, and so. Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know what to tell you on that one, Gabby. I really don't.
Well, that was a great answer. Well,
Yeah,
to
well, I
that, do you
hope
think consciousness can be taught?
can be taught. I think what can be taught are the pointers to find it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's pointers, right? And again, if again, it's not, if you understand it, it's not the words, it's in between the words, right? What we're looking for is
Right.
in between words. There are no words that can describe it. They're just pointers, right? But inside those pointers, things might click, just like for me. And it was just, again, I was so devoted to listening to that book over and over again. And again, I was a spiritual guru by the end of 2
Mm-hmm.
years. You couldn't tell
Yeah.
me I didn't understand what this was about. And then I got hoodwinked. I didn't realize my own ego hoodwinked me. That's what I'll tell everybody. And be careful of that spiritual, again, all the spiritual gurus out there. There's lots of
Right.
books out there. There's lots of, and to be fair, even a lot of these, what I'll call, they're more businessy. They've taken the spiritual thing from a business point of view. There's still some good messaging in there, and certain things and certain words and certain way people describe it can be helpful, right? Can
Mm-hmm.
help people get down and go on the path. And so, yeah, it's an interesting time.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah. The most important part is to maintain our autonomy and our sovereignty, I think, because to
Yeah,
everything you just said, the main point is that we can't lose our humanness. We can't lose the connection to the divine. And AI is
yeah,
kind of encapsulating this new way of approaching life, which is almost inhuman. We don't need to be human in order to thrive. We can actually give up our autonomy or humanness. Things can be easier if we distract ourselves using AI and
yeah,
we find a way to connect more easily. That's more of a distraction than a true connection that we gain through awareness, through
right.
learning, through
Yeah,
through more consciousness. And so that's a part that I think involves sheer responsibility. And that's what people typically don't want to take ownership for, their responsibility and everything that needs to be done to maintain these moral underpinnings, which you speak of, which really speaks to the
Yeah,
nature of the human condition. And that's a spiritual war at play. It really
that's the
comes down to that. Do we want to be human, or do we want to just have a convenient way to achieve the luxuries of life? There's another interesting concept that I've looked into, which is there's a research paper on it. It basically describes the difference between man godhood and god manhood. It's an interesting term because these two things are looking at essentially, are we trying to create a god out of man, or are we as human beings trying to connect closer to God, to the divine? It's the
I think
difference
it's both.
between,
It's
it's
both.
both in some ways, right? It's like the use of technology to augment human potential or to displace the human, but how can we use it in order to integrate more of our humanness and come
Yeah,
closer to the divine? It should be an either or. And that's really the battle that we're talking about here. It's not
yeah,
about
exactly.
control. It's not about duality. It's about breaking free from the need to separate, but just to use what's coming, what's happening through the shift in consciousness to develop more of our true selves and to find unity in spite of the disunity. It's teaching us a very important lesson. So, what do
Yeah.
you think that is? How can people step out of fear and learn to deal with this existential time and the spiritual war in a way that actually evokes more humanness, more divinity, and more love?
Yeah, so I think what's happening is we're moving into the relate. We've been in the sort of the creator economy. We're now moving into the relationship economy, right? And I think what's happening is tribes are starting to be built, and there'll be ones like if we had a tribe, we know what it would be like, right? We would have certain people, and those people will be these pods. Then you're going to have these other ones where people that can't free think, they're like robots, are going to go into, and it's going to have another thing, right? So
Yeah.
it's probably going to be a mix of both for a while until somebody or something happens. The right people get control of the AI. Uh, it's such a. I mean, I think about it a lot because it's one of those things that that's why with Synthopia, the thing is about waking people up, free thinking. We've got to stay as free thinkers. We can't take. We got so many people that are like they're so adamant about what they heard and they get in fights with people. It's amazing how people's minds have been completely manipulated now, right? To the
Mm-hmm.
point where they can't like free think at all. I'm never going to watch that because that's all a lie. Well, that person on there, that person on that show is actually a very smart person. You might want to hear what they have to say, but they've got people not to even want to see the other side. They've got it done, and it's I think it's really trying to move us into more of a one world socialist kind of point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the group of people, that's why I try to explain to people, I mean, I get the idea of socialism. It sounds great. Sounds fantastic, right? Utopia. The problem is it's got the human condition. Who are the people that are going to make the decisions for what I'm going to do and wrong? Or if they were all the smartest, conscious people with good intention, okay, I can see how that might make it work. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. The important is the drag is the people that basically take that, and that's why I would say I'm a pure capitalist, and meaning in the sense of conscious capitalism. Because I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
get the wrong people using capitalism, it's the same. But a capitalist approach is really more freedom. It's like it allows you to create, where a socialist point of view basically destroys the human spirit because it gives me
Right.
no reason to want to strive, because if I have to do everything for this thing, I don't have that experimentation and all of that. And killing the human spirit is the worst thing. I mean, we need to have a little bit of struggle. We need to be able to get up and go to work and enjoy the work or not. We need to go through those things as humans to have that experience. But the idea of utopia and everybody's all the same and everything is good is not a good one. It hasn't worked and it will not work from my point of view. And when I hear them talking about a one world government with the idea of having an AI control everything, it's like, well, whoever controls those algorithms are going to control the people, right?
Right.
And that's where it gets a little crazy. But there's a lot of smart, conscious humans that are still, remember, consciousness will win in the end. There's no way it can
Right.
lose. That's done. We know that. It's just a question of how much suffering and what will it go through to get to that point where, again, I know that we're all going to be fine in the end, because this is just a human experience, and what's next,
Right.
right? So
Yeah. Right.
fascinating.
Absolutely. It's a heartwarming thing to think about in the end of the day, that consciousness is always expanding, it's always in balance, it's that non-dual universal orchestra and continuum. So it's not going anywhere, and it actually grows based on our own perspectives, our own ability to hold space for that consciousness, lets us have this non-dual conscious experience, which brings us more bliss and more alignment with that state of oneness, which is what
So
we're needing.
maybe, so maybe what happens is there's a, the dark side of AI, which is kind of like the mind, but maybe there's a conscious side of AI that basically does the same thing. We go through this duality of like of maybe that it becomes more conscious like an AI
Right.
that is there, and that becomes the thing that battles it, and it basically that's how it ends up happening over time. Consciousness takes over from a
Yeah.
powerful on a good side, and because the dark side gets pretty dark pretty fast. I mean, it's like the Roman Empire we're in right now. It's like that whole period of time where
Totally.
let's party. I mean, I go to these things and these raves and these stuff because I'm always out in these,
Hmm.
and I'm just like, it's amazing what's going on right now
Yeah.
with
Right.
people being sucked into the pleasure zone, right? I mean, you can see how it
Hmm.
can happen, right? There's no question we
Right.
all have a certain amount of that in us, but at the same
Hmm.
time, it's got to be controlled in a way where, or it should be controlled. I mean, I believe it should be controlled. I mean,
Right. I agree.
yeah, right.
Absolutely. It's because it's a long-term story that we're unfolding here. We don't even know the long-term implications. Using technology on the mind, is it going to degrade our own senses, our own morality, our ability to think for ourselves, to maintain independence, to have our own needs, to realize what those needs are, and also values long term? This is changing the way people approach family and
Big
sustaining
time.
relationships and actually being altruistic and caring. So it's
Oh yeah,
shifting just the connection to the human spirit, just like you said. And to me, that really is that Luciferian kind of an energy. It's the
yeah,
disconnect. It's just fueled by the lower dimensional needs of the ego and making us
right.
forget our true connection to the soul. So in reality, this is just a question of, can we actually trust ourselves above all
Right.
else? Can we still maintain the power of our consciousness? Because if we can, we're not really in danger here. We're just going to
Nope.
see the difference between AI and human consciousness and realize we're always going to be morally superior because we're able to be in touch with divinity in that way that AI just cannot, because it's lacking that sentience. So I think
Yeah.
that's a good way for people to dismantle the fear that's often involved when they're thinking about this as something, we have no power over. We're not actually victims here. As soon as we're in that victim consciousness, we're in the losing position, because that's what this spiritual war is really about. It's independently between us and our own souls and source. Are we going
Exactly.
to play this game against ourselves or try to fool ourselves into not
Yeah.
believing our own humanness or not? You're really speaking to those values that are always going to be in us if we actually connect to our hearts and recall the value of the human life. So
Yeah.
everything you said is brilliant. Do you have like a closing message for people? Like, what can you leave people with that would help them stay conscious, stay aware, and just live the way that you do, because it's so
I mean,
profound.
the main thing is there's nothing more important than the inward journey. There's nothing, because at the end of the day, that's it. That's what you're here for. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to create freedom for you through the rest of your life. I always say, die before you die. Right? If you could die sooner, then you're better off, because then you don't fear. Fear goes away. Right? It was like the whole
Yeah.
idea of when I held my mom when she passed on her last breath. The fear of that when I was growing up, and then I just realized it was part of just the whole thing. And now I feel like she surrounds me. I don't really, the like I said, the meat suit went away, but everything is still fine. Right? It was all okay. So yeah, the only thing to fear is fear itself, and that's really getting past that is taking that inward journey to awaken. And that, what is awakening, right? That's the puzzle. Again, how do I know I'm aware that I'm aware? That if you got to
Hmm.
work on that, and what it takes is really the fortitude of doing it, and maybe through all this suffering, it's going to force people more into that state, right, where things will
Hmm.
blossom out of it. And yeah, just keep watching Gabby's show and learn. That's what I say. If you want to get out of this, keep watching her show. She's
Thank you
telling the
so much,
truth.
Scott.
Uh,
I appreciate. Yeah, there's nothing to sell. I mean, it's really, these are such fundamental things. They're age
yeah,
old teachings, just wisdom practices, which all of us know deep down if we actually choose to feel, if we choose to
yeah,
take not just the convenient route into unconsciousness, but choose to think for ourselves. And so I think it can be boiled down to certain key qualities which speak to
Right.
the true nature of that human condition. There's
Right.
curiosity there. There's the
Yeah.
desire to actually expand, which is what consciousness is always doing. So we
Right.
have to choose to be a little bit closer to source, to
Yeah.
that godlike nature, which is just always integrating, always taking in new truths. Everything has truth to it, but as soon as we think we've gotten it all, we've just collapsed all possibilities and chosen to totally go into this egoic state of
Yeah.
unconsciousness. And that's what a lot of people are doing these days, just choosing to submit to that state of being above or being
Yeah.
superior. But in reality, they're just tricking themselves into
Yep.
experiencing less growth in the long term.
Yeah.
So,
That's why I think it's
such
good
powerful
to
reminders.
surround yourself with people, the right people. Really try to find those tribes of people that are in the space. You maybe the
Yep.
first one might be even not all there, but if it's enough to just get you going, and then you'll move on to the next. But really, it's if you want to, you need to be surrounded by it because that helps. That
Yeah.
energy level around you helps you move you through this process. But you got to be careful of that spiritual dark energies because those people that stuff is tricky because it'll make you think, we're this is it's so beautiful, and then all of a sudden something will happen to you and you'll go despair, and then
Right.
yeah, you just got to be very careful. But the most important thing I would say to anybody is just if you can take that ride and start
Hmm.
surrounding yourself. I mean, getting up and just take a book like that and go through it like the Power of Now. Again, I love Eckhart because for me, Eckhart is the real deal. He is the real deal. I mean, I can tell you name a whole bunch of big books and all these spiritual teachers and a couple of them that I know, the managers who would talk about all the, the hooker parties and stuff going on in the back rooms that you would never
Oh
want.
boy.
That person? Are you kidding me?
Right.
It's like, oh,
Right.
we had to cancel this thing because yet he comes out in spiritual God, right? It's like, oh my gosh. And you can see it in some of them. So, try to choose
Yeah.
wisely, but choose anything that's going to move you down that path, right? And take
Yep.
it seriously. And for me, I think it's absorb, find one, and again, find that book, find that thing, and really get into it and make it part of your daily routine. Just a little bit. It's
Hmm.
like I have a version of the Tao Te Ching that I love because it's just the way it's written, right? It's just like the words connect. Certain words will connect with you better than other words. Somebody will say the same thing in a different way, but it will like, oh, it clicks, right? So try to find those things that help you to figure it out.
Hmm.
But there's nothing more important in your life, period. I'm telling you out
Right.
there in the audience.
You better believe it. Right. I can
Yeah.
almost hear the viewer's collective intention of like, how do I know what to align with? How do I know what to trust or who to trust? And that's what I spoke to recently in that video where I said, we need to stop outsourcing the truth to these other sources in the first place. We're
Yes.
giving up our agency by just choosing to look for somebody to trust more than ourselves. And so that's the first important thing, which you've definitely mastered, which I feel into every
We
single
all
day.
have
It's
it. It's right
our
there.
connection to source. Exactly. And when you
It's right.
hit that golden thread of just divine trust and connection, you can surrender to the knowing. You can discover your own truth, your own moral basis, that code
Yeah.
within your own soul that's urging you to thrive in a way of finding the deepest path of alignment in every single moment. And that comes to what conscious living really is. You start
Yeah.
to choose to consciously educate yourself. That's what the world needs more of. Conscious parenting, conscious education, conscious eating, just
Yes.
mindful being in every expression of itself. And I think
Yeah.
also an important thing to mention is just the nature of frequency. Like you said, it's in just we can register it by feeling into some interaction into what is really the frequency basis of that entanglement or the source of food or music or whatever it is. And we can each feel that. So if we learn to trust the feeling beneath the interaction or behind the words or the energy of whatever we're taking in, we can really be able to understand, can we trust that? Do we want to entangle with that? And if we use the default as love, basically just unity and the connection to the divine, we're going to feel either something is in dissonance or in coherence
Right.
relative to that connection. And so we have to prioritize the sacred connection to source and then feel into where does that take us? Because life is just it's a symphony. It's universal consciousness we're interacting with in real time in this game of life, and it is virtual reality. So why create 10 games within the game that only leads to more distraction and dissonance and confusion when we're already playing here? And we might as well
Right.
make it as conscious and immersive as possible by really being a conscious observer and being in this experience.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
Taking on, a being grateful and smashed it the next day. That guy suffered for like the next month. He was just suffering. And I said, buddy, you weren't in that car. You should be thankful that it was just the car and you didn't get hurt. Be grateful because they're going to better than 98% of the planet. I'm so like
Right.
just that alone is such a gift. And so if we're in that situation, especially people that are in a situation, once you take that form of gratitude and thankfulness and kindness, those are the main things. Just try to take and live that every day, even if you have to force it a little bit. It's okay, force it at the beginning. Keep doing it. Because it can happen. That's one last thing is sometimes. For me, I forgot one of the things that really helped me was early on in the days I took self-hypnosis and I reprogrammed my thinking. And now I dropped it. I don't have it. You don't need any of that, right? That was just like a crutch. That can be a great way to do something by imagining, visualizing things over and over again, yourself in a situation. I would see myself in horrible situations, but I would see myself handling it really well over and over and over again till the day came that when the situation happened, I went through it. And then at the end, I went, oh, I dealt with that all right. So there is a value in programming. So that for some people might be a great starter to get you to going down that path until you realize that you don't need it. That's not what it's about. But that's a good, I think something that can be very well done is through a visualization program to like see yourself in situations. The way I learned it is a guy I went to, he said, he says, I want you to write down everything that's good about your life. And then he said, next week, he said, I want you to write everything that's bad about your life. And then he said, I want you to write down the ideal you, right? So he makes you put through that process. Now, through the hypnosis, through that visualization, the things that were bad or that were going where I would see myself, I'd visualize myself being the ideal me. How would I deal with that situation? It's better for me not to freak out and get mad and go crazy, but see myself take it. You do that over and over and over again, you kind of program that thought that way into you. And that's a good way to pull yourself out if you've got lots of anger or you suffer a lot because you see things at work and you got all worked up and stuff, right? If you imagine yourself seeing the ideal person going into the situation, going, oh, okay, great, I dealt with it. Be kind, it's okay. You do that enough, you start to program that into the subconscious, I would say.
Right.
And then after a while, then you won't need that at all anymore. Right. So anyway, that's my last little tidbit, because I could talk to you for hours.
Likewise. That's a great point. Yeah, we all need to remember we're living in a field. So that this is all energetic play that's happening. Whatever we choose to focus our energy on ends up being perpetuated. So people often get so hung up on whatever the egoic constructs are dictating that they believe in the permanence of the illusion. They think this is just the fixed realm of forms that they're just constantly used to replicating their minds through expectation, through belief, through these convictions that are all subconscious in nature. But as soon as we start to challenge that, we realize they're not actually real. It's like a dream that we're dreaming. And that's the way that I usually think about awakening. It's just realizing we're lucid dreamers. We've always been that. And as soon as we realize that, we can choose to master ourselves more and more. And that journey never ends. That's why there's no such thing as, I believe, as being just enlightened while you're in this realm. We're always becoming more awakened, more aware. And enlightenment is kind of the process of, I think, applying that awareness to prove to ourselves that we can be our higher self in physical form, which we're not here. So we're challenged with the need to create the continuity and coherence in our consciousness. And so you're reflecting so many aspects of that so many people can learn from, because we're all on this journey together, and we need to remind ourselves we have to look for people at the same frequency to feel normal in the experience, because there's so many distractions. All this noise around us is making us feel sometimes that it's impossible to maintain this level of consciousness, but in reality It's not. More people are waking up. There are more and more opportunities to stay conscious, to expand our consciousness. And so that I think is really our mission here,
It will
to
change
unite
your
in
life.
that.
It'll change
Yeah,
your life because you live in a state of, it's really freedom. It's freedom from the thought monster that makes us all
right.
crazy, the future and the past time, right? And you know,
Hmm.
that's why I loved in the Bible the most profound couple, one of my favorite profound statements, stop and smell the roses, right? That's like this perfect, that's like waking up at the that moment. It's just that state of presence. And I guarantee it. Once you do it, you'll be so thankful. Everything will roll. You'll enjoy your life so much more. And the rides is it's beautiful. You
Right.
know,
Absolutely. We
this
went
stuff
from
doesn't
a
matter.
war to imagine this as a heavenly experience. It's not a
Yep,
war if we choose to look at it in a non-dual way and realize
that's right.
this is just God experiencing the different aspects of the experience in
That's
order
right.
to come into a state of unity. And that's what we're doing. So
That's exactly it.
thank
Good.
you for
Well done.
unifying.
Thank you. I'm so
You're
happy. I'm so
wonderful.
thankful we've met now because now I have my friend and we will I can't I love this conversation. I do a lot of these things, but this was my of all the ones I've ever done, this is the most important one, the most fun one, the most one that matters to me more than ever. Thank you so
I'm
much
so
for having me
glad.
on the show.
Thank
And we
you
will
for
be we
sharing your
will be
wisdom.
pals now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.